Hello, everyone. Really excited to be here with you today. So my name is Ani. I'm a product manager on the Chrome Web Platform team from Mountain View.
And I'm Malte. I'm from the partnerships team on the Chrome and Web Platform team.
And we want to tell you a little bit about the next generation web on mobile specifically today. So as we all know, the world has moved to mobile computing over the past 10 years. But the way we use these devices is very different from how we use our desktops. And the biggest way in which this is different is specifically in the context of the web. We use the web very differently on mobile than we do on desktop. But first of all, why does this question even matter? Why do we care about the web? It's a pretty old platform. It's been around for a while. And if we look back 20 years or so, there were 34 million people using the web platform. This is pretty big in its own right. It was vibrant. It was an international community, and one of the biggest platforms at that time that had ever been built. But fast forward just 2 decades, and we've seen 100x growth when it comes to the web platform. There are 3.4 billion people today all around the world on a variety of form factors and devices that are using the web. And it's actually the biggest platform that humans have ever built. But it's not just about the reach that makes the web so exciting. It's also about how little friction is required to interact with the web. It turns out that with the web, anyone can access any application with simply tapping a link or navigating to a URL. It's open and it's permissionless. This is true even from the creation side of a web page. Anyone can build a web application, put it up, and be confident that these 3.4 billion users can access it on any device. Independent of the operating system, the form factor, the size, it'll work. And businesses today know this. They want to reach their users where they are. And a lot of this growth, as we've seen on the web, has come on mobile. So everyone cares and knows about the importance of a mobile website. So let me just ask the room here. How many people here have a mobile website? Raise your hand if you have one. OK, it's a lot of us. Now keep your hand raised if you think your mobile website is pretty decent. It does its job. It allows your users to perform the core actions needed to take part in your service. OK. Fewer hands, but still a good number. Now keep those hands raised way up if you feel like your mobile website is outstanding. It's gorgeously designed. Your users are raving about it. It's seamless. It's fast. It's polished. Looks like we have one hand up there. And I would love to know what website that is so we can all visit it. No, I'm kidding. And so this is interesting. And I think we're all aware of this. We know the web is really important, especially the mobile web. But not a lot of us have built incredibly polished experiences that we're really proud of. Maybe Malte can tell us more about why this might be.
Yeah, so there was this story in 2010 by Chris Anderson, the TED curator, and also one of the guys behind Wired magazine, basically said the web is dead. And what he was referring to is specifically the mobile web. And we can actually explain why he had that feeling. Because over the last 2-3 decades, what all the browser vendors in the world have been doing is optimizing for a desktop experience, right? And then sometime in 2007, this thing, mobile, suddenly came up. And the browser vendors, including Google, including Microsoft, all of them have never really considered all the constraints, the challenges that you have when you move from a desktop to a mobile device. That being said, they still just took that browser from a desktop to a mobile device, assuming that it will just work fine and you can perfectly expect someone to enter a URL on that small, tiny device. And that turned out to be not really true. We saw that since 2007, when Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone, he was actually of the opinion that if you just know all the web standards, you will be able to build the best possible experience for these mobile devices. Today, we see that the majority of time, 87%, is spent inside an app and not inside the browser. The browser is actually the minority of that time that users spend. But there is one kind of nitty-gritty detail that you shouldn't be forgetting when you see that number, that the majority of those 87% is Facebook, Candy Crush, Snapchat, probably Instagram. So if you are not one of those, you have a very low likelihood that a user will actually see you, and even if you get downloaded, that they will ever open that app. And we talk about app fatigue or app lottery in that context, and that has been a big issue for a lot of advertisers or whatever kind of property you have. If you want to go on that or be on that device, that has been an issue. There's another issue from a marketing or distribution or reach perspective where it is so much harder to actually get on the screen of that specific user. And Arnie was saying earlier that on the web, it's simply tapping a link and you are there. And every single of those 3.4 billion users is on that website. Whereas with an app, you actually need to drive people into that. And there are a lot of friction points along that journey that make it really hard and, in fact, expensive to be on that device and get a new user. So you could even argue that every single one of you who was just raising the hands and then taking down the hands was having this dilemma where either you built an app that had all those capabilities like push notifications and it worked offline and all these nice things, or you built for reach, but you were never able to actually build for both at the same time. So every single one had that dilemma, and we see that over time being more and more difficult to solve. There are two takeaways, though, that the majority of purchases, if you look at mobile, still happen on the web, and that can be easily explained by the pure reach, because if you just tap on a link and you can make a purchase, that's relatively easy. If you need to go to an app store, download, give permissions, maybe you don't have that storage, that's kind of hard to make that purchase when you need to create an account and so on and so forth. But at the same time, we also see that the conversion rates on the mobile web are significantly lower than what we have seen on desktop over time.
So as Malte pointed out, a lot of these purchases are happening on the mobile web, but the conversion rate is much lower compared to the desktop web. So we've been thinking a lot about this problem. We realize there's a lot of room to improve the mobile web conversion rate. And we don't want to do it alone. We want to work with other browser vendors like Microsoft, Apple, Opera, even large partners like Facebook to figure out how we can improve these conversion rates. And the fundamental questions that we've been asking ourselves is, what would a browser look like if it were built from the ground up, with the mobile form factor first kept in mind when designing this browser? You know, it would probably have a bunch of new capabilities to bring it to parity with native, but it would still maintain that wonderful property that makes it so unique, the fact that it has universal reach and that everyone can access it from any device. So we think we're there today. We aren't the only ones who've been thinking about it. We've been working with the web developer community for a while, but we're starting to realize that folks beyond the web community are starting to take note and actually grok some of the business implications of having a great mobile web experience. And this is just one example out of many that are being reported on over the past year. And fundamentally, what we're noticing too is that more and more web apps are leveraging some of these modern new web technologies to build amazing mobile web experiences. So today, we want to tell you about a few of these and show you examples of how they're used in the wild to improve their respective customers' journeys through the mobile web, and also give you a little taste of how you can get started with making your mobile web experience better. So every business, of course, has a different customer journey, but we think we can roughly map it into 4 different segments that we'll tell you about. So first, it all starts with speed, specifically loading speed. This is your opportunity to make a great first impression to users who are just getting to know your brand and your experience. And you want to increase the likelihood that they're going to stay with you along their customer journey. And to address this, we, along with the open web community, created a standard called AMP, or Accelerated Mobile Pages, to make that first page load really fast. And we'll dive into more details for all these technologies later in the session. Next comes engagement. So it's not enough for users to just get to that page really fast. Every subsequent interaction, the transitions, the navigations, the taps, need to be smooth. They need to be buttery. They need to feel like native apps do when they provide that extra polished experience. We all know that feeling when we're scrolling through a site and we experience that jank or that lag. It actually feels like a physical sensation. You're swiping and it's not moving. And we hate it. Users hate it too, and they'll abandon your experience if it's not highly engaging. This is why we've introduced, with the open web community, a suite of new web technologies built as APIs on the modern web that can be bundled into what we call progressive web apps to make rich and engaging experiences. Next comes the crucial step of conversion, as we've been talking about during the entire conference today. This is when the user often becomes a customer rather than just a user. And this typically happens in the context of a form, whether it's a payment checkout form or it's a sign up to become a user or whatever else it might be. And we all know that typing on mobile is hard. We've talked about that earlier today. And while browsers have started to help address this with things like autofill, we think the recent introduction of web payments will actually make conversions dead simple on the mobile web. And we're really excited to dive into that. And finally, it doesn't end with conversion. There's retention. It's not enough for a user to simply become a customer. We need to make it really easy for them to come back to your experience and to have a great second and third and beyond experience. And this is where the recent introduction of the Credential Manager and push notifications provide the ability to create a really retentive experience for your users. So Malte will tell you a little bit more about each phase of this journey and examples of partners who've built on top of these new technologies to provide an amazing experience.
So exactly, it all starts with speed, and we know, in fact, Google is probably very obsessed with speed. Speed is one of the most important things when we build new products. We had in talks earlier stats around speed and how it affects bounce rate or how it correlates with conversion rate. So I don't need to repeat that speed is one of the most important things. When is it fast enough? Probably when the human eye can't perceive that there's any sort of loading. So if it's instant, then it is sort of fast enough. And the performance has been a huge, or the loading performance has been in one particular industry a huge problem. That's the publishing industry. Because when you are in publishing and you have like a news magazine, people around you might start adding additional tracking pixels or a bit of ad unit here or there, and suddenly you end up with like 7 seconds loading time, which is a bit of an issue when you try to monetize that site, but it kind of never really loads. So this is where we started to work with the publishing industry and many other partners to start this open source format, Accelerated Mobile Pages, which is specifically designed for landing pages. And we saw that the median load time for content that is created in this AMP format is below a second, so around 700 milliseconds. We see that it is on average 4 times faster than any content that publishers have built. And in fact, it is so successful that we decided to roll it out across all of Google Search, which means if you build content in the AMP format, you will actually see that appearing in the search results with this nice little thunderbolt. Here's an example from eBay. eBay created about 9 million of those landing pages already. So the user taps it, and instantaneously there will be a landing page for the user in front of the user on the device. This is great. So the user got to your property, to your brand, they see something, and they expect to have the same delightful experience going forward. So we worked with other partners, one of them being Airberlin, a airline from Germany, the number 2 in Germany. And they realized that if you booked a ticket on Airberlin, that is not a guarantee that you also downloaded the app. So they wanted to provide the same kind of experience to passengers who haven't downloaded the app. And they heard about this concept of progressive web apps, which is essentially a term to coin a set of new web technologies. But ultimately, it's about providing a native app-like experience on the mobile web. So all the great stuff from native, bringing it to the web. This is what they have started doing. It all really starts post the actual booking, where when you booked a flight on Airberlin, you can opt into a push notification, which is sent through the browser. So you don't have to have the app on your device installed to get this nice little reminder that your check-in is now ready. They actually took it one step further, where they allow the passenger to check in with one click. So you tap that notification, next thing that appears is your boarding pass generated on the mobile device. It uses nice things like caching in the background, so the experience on the device is super smooth. You have the entire journey, every single leg of your journey is also there, and it's very kind of easy for the user to go through that experience. In fact, if the user decides that it is a good travel companion along your route, again, they just need one tap to add an icon, and you could think of it as a shortcut basically on your home screen. So when the user adds that to their home screen with that one tap, no download required, then they can start it from the home screen and get literally that app look and feel. In fact, it is so much app look and feel that because the website will not load with a URL bar, it will load full screen, that the user will probably not be able to differentiate whether it's an app or a mobile website. And really, the user shouldn't need to differentiate between the one or the other. Because everything has been cached, as you can see, the screenshots are in flight mode. Everything works offline. So a first time that a mobile website will actually work offline. So this is what we think a pretty delightful experience for a user. Everything that he knows from the native world has been replicated on the web. And Ani said that earlier, great, you have a user who is happy and who has this app kind of experience, but really you want to turn that user into a customer at some stage. And I was just trying to book a Guinness Storehouse tour, which includes a free pint. You can book that, for example, on Get Your Guide, one of the largest tourist ticket players in the market. But this right now would be a checkout flow, and many of you know that from many other sites, a checkout flow that requires many, many input fields that need to be filled out. And there's one question where we thought, well, if many devices actually have some sort of payment stored already on the device, and the majority of devices have some sort of payment, credit cards, something like that on the device, why can't we figure out a way that the merchant, the website, can access those in a secure way? So we started thinking about and working with Facebook, Microsoft, and many others to introduce this web payments standard or payment request API, which is essentially a matching of the merchant saying, these are the payment methods that I accept, and the browser then figuring out what kind of payment methods are available on the device. And everything will be surfaced in this nice little UI where the user just says, pay, and depending on the payment method, so for example, for Android Pay, it would just be a fingerprint scan, and the checkout is completed. For a credit card, it would be the CVC, and so on and so forth. Because this is an open web standard, it basically allows any payment method to integrate, and at the same time, any merchant to use that to eliminate the checkout flow entirely. And if you see something like that, and I have, as you can see, purchased that ticket to the Guinness Storehouse, it is now simpler on the mobile web to actually complete a purchase than it is on the desktop, because there's no checkout flow anymore whatsoever. Again, great, you have this customer, you want this customer to come back, and you want to ideally provide that customer a very personalized experience. This is, again, another web standard that we started to introduce, because when you have a registration or some sort of login, we see that about 92% of the users just drop off if they can't log in. And we want to avoid that. The solution to that is what is called Credential Manager API, or the Credential Manager, which allows basically to create an account with one tap using the credentials that are inside the browser. And again, this is a web standard, so working cross browsers. Once you have created that account, you want to make sure that that user has that same experience whenever they go back to the website. And the same web standard actually allows you, without any click, to auto-sign in that user using that same account that they have used to create that account initially. So all in all, you could say there are more and more of those technologies from different partners. You have seen many examples that allow you to provide that kind of seamless experience.
So thanks, Malte. So we've seen examples of these new modern web technologies in action scattered across different properties that different partners have built out. But what we want to show you now is what it might look like for all of them to fit together cohesively into a single customer journey, and show you what a modern website might look like built from the ground up using the next generation mobile web. So I live in San Francisco, and we're all obsessed with hoodies there. And I have a pretty big collection of them. I often take a metro home on my commute. And one day, let's say I'm bored, and I want to buy another hoodie to add to my collection. Trust me, this is a very San Francisco story. So how might I start this sort of journey? I'll probably begin with a Google search. And my first result after typing in fleece hoodie is from this company called Eastcombe. Looks interesting. I've been to their website before, so let me tap on it. Wow, that loaded pretty fast. I got to their page almost as if it was already on my device, as if I had launched a native app. And I see that at the very top, there's a blue bar that indicates that it's an AMP page. So that was great. It loaded so fast, and it looks like I have a lot of potential fleeces to choose from. So I'll scroll around for a little bit, but my favorite one is the first one at the very top. So let me tap on that. And again, this next page load is also really fast. And what happened here behind the scenes is that while I was on that AMP page, the website fetched resources that it think I might want to access later, so subsequent pages that I might want to tap on, to make my next navigations really fast. And it essentially graduated to a progressive web app, which is now what I'm using. But unfortunately, this item is out of stock. I can see that on the page listing. But what's interesting is that I see a little prompt to get notified via a push notification when the item might be back in stock. Now this is nice because it means that I don't need to proactively go back to the page to constantly monitor whether this hoodie is available. It looks like the website will just notify me, so I don't need to worry about it. And so I'd love to stay posted rather than having to proactively visit the site again. So I'll say, yes, browser, you can send me notifications. And the great part about all this is that it happened in context. I was asked to give this notification permission only when it mattered, not when I first landed on the site, not at a different point in the journey, but only when I really wanted to stay up to date on this item. So I'm a little bit disappointed that my favorite hoodie isn't available to purchase, but I'm glad I'll be notified later. But I still want to keep browsing. I want to see whether there's something else I might want to buy. So usually when I commute home, I take the BART, which is an underground metro system in San Francisco. And unfortunately, my cell provider doesn't have great network coverage down there, which means that my connectivity is a little spotty. I noticed that I get sort of the dead signal icon on my phone. But I'm still able to browse around on the site. And honestly, I don't even notice that I'm offline. It's not only that initial page that I'm able to look at, but also other pages that are on the site. I'm able to tap on them and navigate to them as if I have full connectivity. Because this site is architected as a progressive web app, it fetched all these resources and cached them offline. And so it feels like I'm still online, even though I don't have any reception. But unfortunately, I can't quite find another hoodie that I'd like. So I put away my phone and just start playing Angry Birds for the rest of my commute. I guess I still need my phone for that. I put away the app. But then when I go home later that night, I receive a push notification telling me that that hoodie that I was so excited about is now available for purchase. This is great, and I'm quite excited about it because I'd forgotten that I was even interested in that hoodie earlier in the day, and I really want to buy it now. So I'll tap on this notification, and I get taken straight to that item page where I'm ready to sort of add it to my cart and make that transaction. So I'll go ahead and do that, and it's just one tap to do that and add it to my cart. And when I click on the checkout page, I get signed in automatically because of that Credential Manager API that Malte talked about earlier. I'd been to Eastcombe before, and I might have already made an account, and I don't need to go through the process of signing in again. And then when I'm ready to actually place my order, I see that web payments interface, and with another additional tap, I can place my order. No searching, no navigations required, only 3 taps from when I received that push notifications. But it doesn't end there, because when I get taken to that order confirmation screen, the browser realizes that I do like Eastcombe. I've been there often enough that it might be a brand that I do care about. So it prompts me to add an icon to visit Eastcombe really easily to my home screen. And I'll say yes, because yeah, I really do like that hoodie. Maybe I'll like more. And an icon is added to my home screen. And a couple days later, when I'm commuting home again and I'm bored and dataless, I can look for another hoodie for me to buy. So this is great. It all happened in the context of sort of the mobile web using these new suite of APIs and was a really seamless overall sort of user experience. But what does this mean for the bottom line of a business? What are some of the business impacts of using progressive web apps and these new technologies? Malte?
Yeah, let's talk about a bit of metrics here. So we did work with a couple of partners over the last couple of weeks and months. This is, as Arnie said, relatively new stuff, so not everybody may be super familiar with that. Some first movers you had or you did see some of those examples. We looked into metrics, and some of our partners shared some of those with us. Jumia is one example. If you don't know Jumia, Jumia is a top e-commerce player in Nigeria. They actually face that problem where users often have flaky connectivity or flaky network, which means you might want to check out something, but suddenly when you hit that last step, the network just breaks down, and that happens very often. So what they did is they re-engaged those previously abandoned shopping carts to tell the user, you now have internet connectivity. Why don't you come back to complete that purchase that you were initially planning to do? This is a way that they increased conversion of those abandoned shopping carts by a significant amount. Other great examples are AliExpress, who use all these best practices, all these PWA, or the technology that we coined PWA as a concept, to bring the user a very smooth and slick experience on their mobile website. You can see that it is actually without the URL bar, so obviously the user launched it already from their home screen and has this native app look and feel. This is how they have a significantly higher engagement as well as conversion on their site using this progressive web app. So you see that using all those technologies or a subset of those technologies at specific stages of this user funnel or the conversion funnel really helps to take the great reach that the web has already and add all those capabilities so that each one of you can solve that dilemma.
So it's awesome that we're seeing partners take advantage of these modern web technologies at nearly every stage of the customer journey, but we want to bring this back to you. Tactically speaking, how can you get started to take advantage of some of this stuff? And the key point that we want to highlight is that you don't need to re-architect your website from scratch to take advantage of the next generation mobile web. You can add them in a layered way. So one easy place to start is by focusing on just a single part of that journey that you want to improve. And to give you an example, Booking.com realized that they wanted to improve the retention part of their funnel. So for customers who had already made a booking on Booking.com, they wanted to make it really easy for them to come back and explore more properties and make another purchase. So what they did was they added an add to home screen prompt for customers who had just made a purchase to allow them to easily promote the Booking.com experience to the home screen. And this was a simple way to get users more easily in the door of Booking.com again. Another example is eBay, as Malte pointed out earlier. They were laser focused on improving that initial part of the journey, the speed, making it really easy for users to get to that initial eBay product listing page. And so what they did was integrate their service with AMP. They didn't touch the rest of their site. They didn't re-architect their web app, but they made it really easy for users to get into the door. So this is one simple place to start, focusing on one part of the journey. But next, if you want to add on additional complexity, what you can do is take an entire end-to-end flow that addresses a key customer pain point and convert that into a progressive web app. So we talked about Airberlin earlier and how they wanted to address the issue of users who had booked a ticket but didn't necessarily download the native app on the day of their flight. And they still wanted to make it really easy to tell those users when to check in, to tell them about what their boarding pass is, tell them about gate changes information. And they built an additive part of their application using a progressive web app to deliver push notifications and an add to home screen banner without touching the rest of their site. So it was a simple additional functionality that they layered on while keeping the main core of their site intact. And they did this with a 4-person engineering team very quickly in a couple months and didn't touch the rest of the site. But finally, if you're up for it, you can build the site from the ground up. The Eastcombe example we gave you was fictional, but Flipkart is actually a real example where they rebuilt a progressive web app from scratch. Famously over a year ago, Flipkart killed their mobile website and declared that they were an app-only company. But there was an inspired and motivated team of web engineers within the company, a 7-person team that in less than 1.5 months rebuilt a website from scratch as a progressive web app. It's very fast, it's seamless, engages users with push notifications and an add to home screen banner, and works beautifully offline. Not everyone will have the bandwidth to do it or the resources to do it, but it's certainly possible. But of course, you don't need to rebuild the whole site to see these benefits.
So when you remember the beginning of our talk and fewer and fewer people had their hands up, I think we acknowledge the fact that at the time you may not have all, or didn't have all the technology that was required. But we hope that, like over the last couple of minutes, we were able to show you that those technologies are out there. We would argue that the mobile web is finally open for business, and you can use that technology. There's plenty of links, plenty of resources, obviously. We have an event in San Francisco mid-November that we would love to see some of you being represented, a developer event. And obviously, if you have questions, more than happy to take them, or hit us on Twitter. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Does anyone have any questions for Annie and Malte? Anybody? Yes. Here we go. Go for it.
What's your vision on how web and app will they keep on existing next to each other, or will app replace the web, or what will happen with that? And if they keep existing next to each other, what will be the difference between web and app?
Yeah. So I think there are a couple of interesting developments, and you may have heard of Android Instant Apps, for example. If you remember that framework that we showed that creates that dilemma of either capabilities or reach, and you see how the web moves upwards the capability axis, Android Instant Apps is probably the movement from the capabilities trying to reduce that friction. So you could argue that those two worlds move closer and closer together, and you see a lot of apps being used as a wrapper that actually load a mobile website. We see the starting something from the home screen. Even if it's a mobile website, it doesn't have a URL bar. The user is certainly not able to differentiate the two anymore. So we probably see the two merging, and yeah, but.
In many ways, we actually think this is a good thing for users because we want it to be an implementation detail, whether it's an app or a website. Users don't ultimately care about that. They just want a great experience. And so as these lines start to blur, we think we're doing our job as a developer community and making life easier for our users.
Great.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, fire away. Do you want to see if you can? Here we go. Excellent.
Thank you. How is it with the compatibility? Is this just for Android and Chrome browser, or is it possible to use these features on iOS and Safari?
Want to take a start?
So you could say, because it's a web standard, it requires that every browser individually starts to implement those. And there are certain browsers that are a bit faster. Some of them, for example, Chrome releases a new version every 6 weeks. So there's a high frequency where we can add this set of technologies. There are many browsers that support it. Right now, we have Samsung, Opera, Firefox, Chrome, Edge from Microsoft. Apple may not have all those features right now. It is probably something that we see over time going that direction. I think for EMEA specifically, we see that 2/3 of all mobile traffic can use that technology.
Specifically, though, on the Safari and iOS point, I want to call attention to two things. So one is actually, even though Safari doesn't support a lot of these APIs, they've actually publicly stated that they're interested in working on them, and they're starting to participate in some of these progressive web app conversations. The other is that some of the principles of progressive web app design that you can use have benefits on browsers that don't support some of the APIs, just because the better design improves user functionality. And so I think we provided the example of AliExpress. With the increased conversions, this was true across the board, not just on Android browsers, but including on Safari, on iOS. So it does result in an uplift everywhere.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, guys. Annie and Malte, everybody.